Good morning. Thank you for being part of the GTM Summit. So we're going to kick-start it with John Sela from AppSay, who's a world-renowned marketeer and an authority on digital growth. So I'm going to give it up to him to really delve into the nuances of being a marketeer and all that it takes. Yeah. John?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. How's it going? Great. Good to have you here. And thank you for inviting me to speak to a young, ambitious, entrepreneurial crowd. It's always fun. My name is Yanay. You can call me John. That's my Israeli name. I'm an Israeli. I live in Tel Aviv, right by the beach. I don't enjoy it that much because most of my time I'm out. I'm a former CMO of a company called Galatea that got acquired, currently Chief Marketing Officer for AppSay, the world's largest qualitative mobile app analytics. But it's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm also sitting on a few boards of early to mid-stage startups. What I want to talk to you about today, in the short time that we have, is a subject that is on everybody's mind, and maybe I can share some insights on some of the companies that have actually succeeded in doing some work in that space, which is enterprise funnels and sales. Obviously, it's a huge, huge subject, and even if we sit here for a month, we cannot cover it all, but I thought I'll just touch on various stages along the funnel that might be interesting that I saw working and maybe what's not working. In the end, I hope I'll have enough time to have some Q&A and we can chat about some stuff. Okay, let's do it. So I think one of the first things that I see differentiate the ones that go deep into the enterprise and make a name for themselves really quickly, rather than the ones that are struggling for months or years, is a deep dive and trying to understand how does enterprise in the United States and Europe make purchasing decisions. And that's a really big, almost philosophical question sometimes. Let's talk about the given ones, what we all know. We all know that we need a champion, right? So picking the right champion within an enterprise organization could be a make or break for your sales funnel. We want to have two main things that are the characteristics of a good champion within an enterprise. One, we want them to have a really deep motivation and a lot of interest in bringing your product into their organization. That's kind of like a given. It's a bit deeper than that because they might be in different levels of seniority. We'll talk about that later. And only somebody who's really motivated can actually be a partner in going through the complexity of the matrix that is enterprise in the US and Europe today. The second thing that the champion has to have is the actual ability to move things within the organization. So if you don't have both those checkboxes ticked, you're actually going to fall somewhere short in the middle. And sometimes companies are very excited. They found somebody within an enterprise prospect that is excited about the product, but they actually don't have the right energy or the right tools to move those decisions across the whole organizations. And to find those two, it would be perfect to find one person who can do both. Obviously, that would be perfect. But what we find is sometimes you'll have to create what we call a decision committee that are your partners within the organization that might include of both. So you need to have somebody who's really passionate about that because you can help him make his life better, succeed, be a rock star within his organization, and the other one who can enable him to get the job done. The third and sometimes final person that is very important for us is the finance and legal guy. I'm saying finance and legal guy because it varies. Some companies do it across the board, and some companies do it for different departments. But the finance is usually a big issue. However, I was surprised to find that most of the big deals that fell, I would say less than 10% of the enterprise deals fell at the finance approval level. I mean, the finances or the cost might be a problem at the early stage where you might be scaring off your prospect in a sales conversation. But if it actually gets to the senior level, it gains enough traction. So for enterprise that we all know have these budgets, they look at it differently than they would block you right in the first stages. So that's something to think about. And if we go one step further, there's always some sort of a traditional thinking on how to acquire when we look at go-to-market, and I guess this is what we're all here to talk about. We see two main type of approaches. We see the bottom-up approach, and we see the top-down approach. Let's hunt down the VP or the C-level. Let's get them excited, and they'll make it work because they have everything they need to make big decisions within the organizations. If you only focus on one of these, let's take, for example, the C-level down approach, you'll find many obstacles to actually get this deal through. One of the main reasons is the VP or C-level are not going to be the one using or interacting with your product whatsoever. They might, in some cases, if you're going for the really big one, see maybe one line in one report in every month, in the good case, that is somehow related to your product. And in many cases, in large organizations, obviously, there's a disconnect between the VP and C-level and the actual tools that are being used by all around the chain of management and the junior level to actually get the job done. So in some cases, they might not be even sure that they want to present your product into the organization, because if something like that or even similar is already being utilized, it makes them look disconnected within their organization. So what I found the successful companies do when they go into those enterprise ventures, they understand that real life is a lot more complex, and there's a matrix of decision makers within the organizations that they actually have to target separately. It's gonna sound like a lot of work. It is a lot of work. I don't have good news on that front, unfortunately. But what they understand is that there are different levels of seniority within the organization that are as important, if not sometimes more important on the junior level than the actual senior level of the organization. But what you actually want to be doing is you want to be creating a force, or I call it inertia, towards making a decision that is either positive or negative towards your product. Okay, so how do we do it? This is a term that's been overused and kind of, I think, exploited over the last couple of years. But the concept around it, kind of like growth hacking, yeah. The concepts around it are actually valid. So it's called account-based marketing, and essentially in a sentence, it means if you want to go for enterprise, you don't spray and pray. You don't talk to everyone, and there's some people in the background that you hope it will actually hit, but actually you want to be talking directly to a list that you curated of 10, 20, 50, 100 companies, whatever, that you find would be the best fit for your product, would be the best fit for your company, and would make the most impact in the strategic growth that you're planning to make in a certain market. So if we pick 20 or 50 different companies, we're in a different ballgame now, because we're actually going to be going deeper and deeper into each and every one of those accounts and actually figuring out who are the people within that organization that have somehow to do with the process of deciding whether to take on a product or not. Now, reminding you that enterprise companies, however big and successful they are, if you want to sell a product to them, it is probably because you want to charge them $50K and above, some cases hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of dollars of products. It's important to remember that even though those could be Fortune 500 companies, they do not make these decisions every day. So there is not a highly structured process to actually make those decisions. We'll talk about how we can circumvent that later. But the main concept I want to take from here is that account-based marketing gives you more time to focus on each and every account and build some inertia for your product towards that company. How do we do it? So what we look at now today in enterprise, it's totally different for SMBs and SMEs. We're talking strictly enterprise here. What we're talking about is looking at identifying each and every persona within the organization and building a whole funnel, flowing them towards your product that is entirely different than their colleague might see. So I'll give a very generic example. Let's say you guys are entrepreneurs and you have an HR software to really diminish the cost of doing A and B within the HR and recruiting realm in an enterprise, right? Let's say that. So obviously your user will be somebody within the HR department, but the director of finance would probably be somebody within those realms of decision making. So that person becomes a target. That person becomes a persona that is not even secondary. It's on your radar, working towards creating that initial contact. So, for example, if I have a director of finance and I go and I research one company and I see he's a director of finance, he has maybe 5 to 7 years of experience. I use some let's call it competitive analysis and investigation digital tools to actually enrich his persona. And I see he's living in San Francisco. So I create a full funnel, top to bottom, top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel, to give him different chances of interacting with me. The key here is another important insight. When you build a funnel, it doesn't always go from top to bottom. Some of your target prospects are never, even if your product literally gives them a check for $1 million, they would never go on your website and fill up that glorious demo request, contact us form. They will just never do it because some people are like that. That's a typecast. You need to prepare for those type of typecasts. What those people might not do with filling up a certain form and engaging directly with you towards a sales conversation, they might be interested in learning and expanding their knowledge, and by giving them good content, you can actually draw them in. Now, that content can start from the top of the funnel, not even talking about your product. So going back to Jim, the director of finances that lives in New York and has 5 to 7 years of experience, you probably know what Jim wants in his life. He probably wants to be a CFO, right? If you're going down that path, you're a director of finance, you want to be a CFO for a company. So if you create some sort of piece of content, for example, which is fairly easy to do, how to become a CFO for director of finances living in the West Coast of the United States within 3 years, the complete guide, right? So what you actually do is you get them in the door engaging with you, and this is something that very important to look at with a lot of clarity, otherwise you're just going to waste your own time. You need to ask yourself 2 questions on how do I get them in the door, right? So what is an offer they cannot refuse? The complete guide to fix their life and boost their career. And the second one, as important as the first one, where can we find them? So again, I don't have any good news in terms of the capacity of work that you're going to have to invest, because different prospects within the organization are going to be approached by different channels and different engagement tactics altogether. So that director of finance might read some Quora questions once in a while. He might be a member of a Slack channel for director of finances for startups up until, or for companies that are Fortune 500 companies. And he might be registered to 2 different newsletters. One would be a very generic one. He's interested in VentureBeat. And the second one is Finance Today, the leading blog for innovation in finances, right? So once I've done this profiling of that persona, I know that I need to create 3 different options for my particular persona to engage with me. At top of the funnel one that is very, not even first date, one that is very putting it out there, just giving them something that's interested. On the bottom of that white paper or ebook, it's going to write powered by your product. And you're going to have their details once they come and they fill the form and they get the actual content, right? The middle of the funnel is something that is a bit of a hybrid. I mean, you're not directly pitching to them. You're talking to them about something that gives them value in forms of education and moving them forward in their professional career, and also talking about an area that your product is kind of in. So you're already kind of asserting yourself as, I would say, a thought leader or somebody who's valid in creating that impression, right? And the bottom of the funnel is pretty straightforward. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is why you want to work with us. again. If you create those 3, you have the best chance of getting any engagement with that particular prospect because, as I mentioned, one of them might only be attractive to them. But you're definitely giving yourself more chances to interact. And once you understand where you can find each and every particular persona, you actually go and execute it and get yourself in front of them. A lot of people go for the easy route, which is spending dollars and dollars on PPC campaigns and different platforms, which is fine, but it's only, I would say, 30 or 40% of the growth efforts. What I've learned about startups here, that actually they have a lot of human resources and good one. So all the paths and all the tactics that touch on guerrilla marketing actually could be very beneficial and cost effective versus spending $10,000 a month, $50,000 a month on Google or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. That should come also. But if you don't have those budgets, I would go guerrilla first. Find those people, put those offers, top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, or bottom of the funnel with them, and let them engage. And once you have their emails, you started the journey, okay? So you do that for each and every persona. And once you have their emails, please, no marketing automation, okay? Senior people in enterprise companies smell that from a mile. You will actually burn yourself very, very quick. Once there's a click on the report spam or unsubscribe button, you're done, at least with that particular persona. So what you want to be doing then is you want to curate, I wouldn't say a drip flow, but at least 2 or 3 emails through the course of the next 2 months, not being too aggressive, continuing to add value without pitching your product. You are not supposed to pitch your product to anybody else other than the 2 or 3 people that are the decision committee, which at that point you're going to actually actively go for. The other ones is just building rapport. What you want to get to is the point where day 0 comes and you actually are going to approach, actively give that call, send that hard call, bottom of the funnel email with an offer. They will maybe consult with their colleagues who you haven't pitched to, so you have good rapport with, and they will say, yeah, I heard about these guys. It's all you need. It's the whole difference between I heard about these guys or I have no idea who they are. They just cold call you. So you want to really get to that subtlety of interaction with the whole organization through the different prospects. Let's say you gave a call. You send the email. I know my graphics are a bit unorthodox, but they all mean actually what I want them to mean. When you talk to that person and you finally get that coveted demo, you want them to look at the demo not as a demonstration of how amazing your dashboard is. So many startups fall when it comes to how to position the demo. Nobody actually cares about your dashboard. Nobody cares about your metrics. Nobody cares about the progress that you've done. People care about one thing. Sorry to be, I'm usually a more positive guy, but this is a point where clarity is very important. People care about what can you do for them. So positioning the demo in an enterprise organization, especially for mid-level to senior management, is all about helping them bridge the gap between what's going on outside currently that they feel they have to run after, because if not, they're not being good at their job, they're not being at the level of professionalism they want to hold themselves to. And on the other hand, actually giving that information for free. So when you position a demo, what would be more powerful? To say, hey, listen, we have an amazing product with these amazing features. You're going to see exactly where I click and what happens on the screen. It's going to be amazing. Versus, listen, we feel that your problems can be solved in a much efficient, cost-effective way that can give you a head on the competition and save you money. You don't have to make a decision, but I think you would at least want to hear about this new discipline in your field that is gaining massive traction. Do you have 30 minutes to listen to it? So that is a lot more inviting and a lot more attractive to a senior management or a VP level that always constantly have, I would say, FOMO, fear of missing out, of some other mechanisms that are in works with other companies that they don't know about because they really don't have time to read everything that's going out there and actually explore each and every methodology that's out there. There are, in some organizations and enterprise people, of course, that's their job, to bring in technologies. But it's never the same as somebody actually pursuing professional investment and that advancement. And that happens in every level. So once I position the demo and the demo is happening, the first demo is always I'll get to that later. The first demo is always the most important. Why is it the most important? Because most of the makes or breaks could happen in the first demo, and after the first demo, you always have an opportunity to kind of branch out within that organization. Once you have one demo and you're shut down, and you got that no, it's pretty hard to get back in the race and continue exploring the organization. So a few things where I've seen startups fall and where they actually succeed. First thing is the research part, okay? It's clear to everyone. We've started with research. We've actually been working account-based marketing, so we know everything that is to know about that potential client. So we're coming already prepared with a list of the people that are going to attend the demo, their wishes, their wants, what KPIs are on their reports that they provide to their superiors that you're going to actively push forward so they can look like a hero, okay? It works on every level, up until the CEO level, because the CEO always have the board on top of them, yeah? And then you can control the conversation in a much more confident way. The second thing is focus. Another problem that a lot of startups make in the first demo or the second demo, which are, again, the most important. They're in love with their product, right? You have an amazing product, otherwise you would not risk a good job and a cushy life in some big enterprise and going after your dream. So you're in love with your product and everything it has to offer. So what happens is they pitch each and every feature, sub-reports, little KPI, little function that the product actually can give, thinking that actually perceived as adding value, but it actually decreases. You want the first demo to be focused on maybe 2 or maximum 3 main benefits and core functionalities of what your product can give. The 2 reasons you want to do that, one, is, again, you don't want to confuse and give over information to your target. That could just make them kind of back off and say, okay, I'm not understanding this, but my ego doesn't let me ask all of these questions, or I don't have all of this time to actually go into everything he just told me, so yeah, it's not for me. And the second reason you want to do it is you want to save some deeper discussions for the later stage of the sales process. So if every conversation after the first demo is, okay, so are you going to buy or not? Okay, so are you going to buy or not? It looks a lot different than, okay, by the way, I heard your director of IT might be on the call. Can you please invite him? I have a couple of cool features that I want to show him that I think he would be relevant to. So you're actually unraveling all of this case for a massive ROI for the prospect while the sales process is going. And it's really important that you actually engineer that in that way so it feels like there's traction rather than, okay, we showed you our stuff, now we're going to chase you for a quarter or 2 or whatever until you decide yes or no. The third thing actually comes from statistical data. There's actually an Israeli company called Gong.io. It's an interesting company. They do voice analytics for sales calls. So they actually record all the sales calls, they transcribe them to English, and then they kind of run analytics on them. How much time did the sales guy talk? How much time did the prospect talk? Was it a monologue, or was it more kind of conversational? Which words were mentioned most, and where did they appear? When did the word pricing appear in the call? Okay, so very interesting analytics. And one of the main findings they got from this, analyzing, I guess, thousands of companies that has had thousands of sales calls, is the more you talk about the next step in your first meeting, the exponentially higher your percentage of closing the deal a few months later. So you want to always give time, even on the cost of actually talking less about the product, and actually talking about the next steps. Because, again, to remind you, some people that you're going to be talking to, actually most people, and that's a bit counterintuitive, actually will not know, even if they do love your product, they will not know how to help you or how to start even moving this huge beast towards the decision. So you have to kind of coach them. And this comes to basically the main last part of the call, which is a concept of leading them through the sales process, or basically enabling them to take this journey with you across their own organization. And you have to be on board. You have to explain to them the stages that you found are good to sell to other companies, or if you haven't sold to a big enterprise yet, what you feel might be the best. Get their feedback on that. Sometimes you'll get a lot of assumptions that are going to be basically disproved by talking about this. Maybe because of you don't have an experience, or maybe just the companies that now you're trying to sell to are vastly different than the ones you've sold to in the past. So you want them to explain the stages to you. You want to kind of sync up on a plan, set a timeline, which is super duper important. I've actually found that Indian companies are fairly good at setting timelines, because when you have a timeline, what can we do? We are humans, and humans are always inclined to work within a certain time frame. Things look differently. So then I would say the next demo with those 3 stakeholders should happen on that date. What do you think? Or get back to me, is that date good? Then the second call for evaluation should be 3 weeks from now. Let's give them time to prepare. I'll also prepare you for that call. You're working with your prospect, your champion. And sometimes startups think, okay, the guy that I just talked to is maybe my opening, and I'll get it from there. Don't underestimate the importance of having a champion or a decision committee working with you from the inside. It's somewhere between them having a lot to gain from getting your product in, again, for different reasons, and creating an actual connection with them, right? Because you'll have to talk to them and be very realistic and kind of down to earth with them throughout that process if you want things to actually move. You don't want to be stuck in a kind of very high level discussions where they don't really understand what you want them to do and exactly how you want them to do it. So this is where your investment should come. You've done the sales. Now, one thing that I've noticed that successful startups that go in to their first enterprise do really well is explore exotic deal structures. Okay? So there are some places in startup management or mid-stage management that you don't have to invent the wheels in. This is a case where I would actually at least explore the options. So most of us know the general models. You bill by a one-time fee, a setup fee, a membership, a subscription, maybe the number of seats, maybe the number of data points, whatever it is that your product works with to scale the pricing, right? A few companies that actually makes it different and they actually get in pretty easy into an organization is an example, a company that is called Spotinst. It's an Israeli startup. What they do is basically they save 80% of your AWS costs, right? So they do not charge anything up front, and they say, you know what? We believe in our product. We can save you 80% of the cost. We'll only take a certain percent of what we saved you. So if we don't save you, you don't get it. Seems kind of intuitive, but you would be surprised how many companies can actually do it, and they don't. Another interesting example is a deal that started to take off more and more in the last 2-3 years in the American enterprise and European. It's what we call in the sales world a 3+9. Anybody here in the room heard about a 3+9? So a 3+9 means 3 months plus 9 months. It's all paid, but the 3 months are basically a paid proof of concept, giving the client, the prospect, the option to opt out from a yearly agreement, because we all want a yearly or a bi-yearly agreement, opting out if they don't see enough value. So by giving them the option of having a 3+9, you're basically getting money a little bit less than what you would charge for the full year. So what it creates is basically a situation where your prospect is feeling a lot more comfortable. They have an exit point. They know that the proof is on you. And they're getting a better deal, but they are signing a contract that will actually make them, if they're interested in the product after those 3 months, to continue for a yearly contract in the full cost that you wanted. So in those cases, you can actually charge the full price and only negotiate on those 3 months, which is going to be ending as much less of a discount than discounting the full year. Okay? So I'm not saying either of those might work for 100 different startups, but it's something to kind of think about when you go and pitch a pricing model to a new enterprise. Another kind of side product of that is that it creates interest and it automatically kind of differentiates you from the crowd. Hey, this startup is really putting their cards on the table. It means they're very confident about the product, about the value that they can bring. Let's give them a chance. We also have a lot less of a risk than their competitors or other types of solution for that problem that we've been examining. Let's see it out, okay? as you can see, we're doing it a bit chronologically. Let's say you got the proof of concept, those 3 months, 2 months, 6 months, whatever you need to show value. Many of them fall. Many of them actually do not succeed and do not mature into a deal. What I've found is that most of the proof of concepts, the POCs, that don't succeed because of 2 main reasons. One, they just didn't show enough value, right? But the second one, and the more important one, they were just not good enough at showing the ROI of what they were doing in the last 3 months, okay? So giving value as a given, showing that, justice needs to be shown, yeah? Showing that value is something that you should probably focus on as much as you focus on giving the value, right? Because even if you save that company millions of dollars, if that is not black and white on some report that you can take to, that your champion can take to the decision maker committee, it's worthless. How do they do it? The ones that actually make the proof of concept successful, they focus on one word, stickiness, okay? If you spend all your energy on the first 3 months, it's an enterprise account, it's worth it, yeah? On getting as sticky as possible, your technology, your product, your service, whatever, to the hands of all of those stakeholders that are actual users, you'll be surprised how much of a support you'll get in the end of those 3 months. So actually what happens is, most startups, they oversell, right? They don't undersell, over-deliver, they oversell, let's be honest, right? But it's okay, because if you actually get enough stakeholders to be sticky on your product, people don't like change. After you made them do that change, in the end of the proof of concept, you'll actually find a choir of people from that prospect enterprise helping you prove the case with their own tools that you will never have, because those tools only exist for people that are in that organization. So you want to get them very excited to continue using your product. And if the numbers are maybe 60, 70% of what you said they would be, they will still make the case of, yeah, but let's give them the 9 months more, let's do a yearly, we'll get there, okay? So stickiness is something that if you don't have, is exponentially going to decrease your chances of actually closing the deal after that point. Negotiations, I can tell you from the seller side, in many cases, in many startups that I've been in, Indians are very good negotiators. There's a tactic that I actually noticed Indians do when they negotiate, as a whole, of course, generalizing. But what they do is that they break the deal into many factors, and they negotiate each and every one of those parameters of the deal. It makes it almost impossible to move forward without actually, saying, okay, whatever you want, you got it. And that could be very tedious for cultures that are coming from outside and they're not really sure how to negotiate with those, because negotiation with the US and with Europe is a bit different. Again, this is a whole new subject, but if I had to pick like a couple of things that always stand out from the good deals of with the enterprises in the US and Europe, is finding some gold and putting there in order to take them out, to show alleviation or decrease in price or what we are actually asking from them. But I would also argue, I'm talking to some Indian startups and they say, we're working with a big enterprise. They say, hey, you want to work with us? You'll have our name. It's good enough. You'll have to give us a very big discount if you want us to work with you, right? So in some cases, I would actually argue that if you're doing a short deal, go for it, but have a lot of marketing language consent for them. Because if you want to go into the banking sector of the US, all you need is one bank for credibility. And having one bank approving logo, testimonials from key stakeholders, a case study, a joint venture, connections, I'll show what happens after the deal in a second, it's worth tens of thousands of dollars in trying to convince strangers from different accounts that you're worth it. It really is worth it, okay? I'm not saying you should do it for every deal, but at least in the first few enterprises. So what happens after the deal? Show value fast, that's a given. Continue with the stickiness, the run after stickiness never ends. But again, this connects to the last subject I talked about, which is get in first. Land and expand. If you get into an organization and you know there's a lot more potential, if you see adding that potential and inviting other members of the team at the middle stage of the sale will probably prolong it, wait with it. Wait until you got the signed agreement. Wait until later to put in extra friction. Two main ways you can actually leverage your first enterprise, which I know sounds intuitive, but honestly, from what I've seen, doesn't get spent time on as it should be. The first one is upselling. You build a relationship. After 6 months, if you do a good job, you know 10, 20, 50 people in the enterprise organization. You can basically branch out into that matrix and find more value to give. And the second one is referrals. You will be surprised how much value you can get from 2 warm referrals versus spending 2 months attacking a certain organization without having one person do a little of an intro. And they will do it for you, I mean, if you build that relationship right. Another thing to consider is trying to do the upsell as early as possible. That is another thing that works, but is a bit counterintuitive. As early as possible for inside the deal, and not later. Why is it counterintuitive? Because, we just went through such a long process to convince them to give us money. We're going to start asking for more. First of all, yes, the growth marketers and the marketers here in the crowd know that after you've got somebody to do something, it's much more easy to get them to do that thing again. But from another perspective, if you wait a little bit with the upsell, you should get it right away. If you wait a little bit with it, let's say do it after 6 months or 9 months, what you're going to start hearing is, yeah, we have a renewal in a year. Let's talk about it then. And you don't want to have that conversation. What you want to have is a sense of urgency. But we can't wait 6 months or 7 months to look at all these other features that you're going to be able to benefit and all this extra ROI that's sitting out there. Let's do it now. Okay? Another thing is that you're fresh with the deal. You got the deal because people internally were excited about you. Otherwise, they would not spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on your product. Now is the time to hit the iron again. A question that I get asked a lot. Can this be done remotely? From India, from Israel, from Germany, from Hong Kong? Yes and no. Again, this is a huge subject. But 2 main things that I want to take from this. One, Indians have actually, the Indian market and Indian startups, they have an advantage that us Israelis, for example, don't have. They have superb English, okay? Superb English means when they reach out, when they converse, there are less frictions and guards up by the people that they're trying to sell to. Because if you talk to somebody in their own language and in an articulate way, it's a lot easier to form rapport. And there's a lot less assumptions that are a lot of other things that they don't understand about you, causing them to have some sort of anxieties, and then back away from the table, okay? Another piece of data on that, which is the contrary, I really haven't found many deals that were signed from, let's say, 50K and up that didn't require at least one face-to-face trip to meet the client. It seems to be like this magic number, $40,000, $50,000. Before that, if you do a good job, you can sell it remotely. But still, we're people. Digital, but people. We want to see the eyes of the person that is selling us the product before we make a final decision. There's an anxiety of each and every person in the enterprise prospect of yours, whether to take that decision or not. It's not like this small purchase in your day-to-day where you're the only responsible person for that. You could lose your job if you do in an enterprise, if you do a bad purchase, right? So do prepare in budgeting, planning, timelining, whatever it is, to go and meet these people and have that face-to-face connection with them. I know we don't have a lot of time. Can I take a couple of questions? Great. I was wondering if any of you have. Yeah.
Typically with enterprise customers, you see they don't buy every day. You mentioned that it's sometimes a stat. And so they say, I like what you're saying, but we don't need it right now. There is time for it. How to continue to keep them warm and engaged for that long period? Because it's a long time before they'll come to the table and say, okay, now we need you.
Okay, good question. So you got a couple of ways to do it, as with any relationship building that we have as people. You got the digital way, and you got the face-to-face way, okay? If you're selling to enterprise, you're probably budgeting for a couple of trips, a quarter or every quarter one, where you'll want to just have coffee and just keep in touch, okay? Another thing that I found helps is if you you already have information of others and you think about every 3 months, how can I give just a little bit of value to that person? I mean, if you put up a new piece of content that anyway is intended to get other people in the funnel, you already got that particular person, you can offer that to him. You can send, it's easy as, again, EQ and building a relationship that is not based on selling. Because, and that's a good point that you touched on, some salespeople are so eager to sell, even if they know they can't sell to that person in the next 6 months. All they need to do is kind of maintain the relationship. They keep mentioning the product. Why are you mentioning the product? It's not going to register, and if it is, it's too early. Work on the person to person and hope that they don't leave the organization, because that's something I haven't been able to fix yet. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
Can you? Yeah, so I had 2 questions, Yanay. Thank you for the session. So we have a SaaS-based product for retail distribution. So the 2 questions that we kind of get stumped with most enterprises, one is they ask for scale, which as a startup, obviously we don't have yet. We definitely have the experience and everything else, but no scale yet. And the second is they actually question the mortality of the startup itself. How long are you able to sustain yourself? Or what's going to happen to the company, you know, if you get acquired and things like that. So those are the 2 places, especially in India, is where we pretty much get stumped with. And in fact, we recently lost a deal because they said, you know, you guys don't, our financials don't add up to their criteria.
Okay. What basically I'm hearing is concern and friction management. And I think I mentioned it when I talked about exotic deal structures. If you are going for an enterprise funnel, you better be prepared for that. I mean, if you are going to spend the time and energy in the funnel of getting actually those people pitching it and being ready and hopefully getting them to actually say yes, you need to be aware that there are going to be a few things that they'll probably ask you to do. So if you don't have the budget, I would not even go that route. But in terms of getting into scaling, this is what the proof of concept is about. Okay? Israelis are really good at fake it till you make it kind of thing. And actually, honestly, many startups are like that. So it's not a bad thing to do, because if it was, I guess maybe 80% of the companies today would not be as they are. You have to fake it till you make it a little bit and get all your resources focused so you can get past the first hurdle. Paid POCs are a must, though. I mean, what I found, it reminds me of another thing, what I found is that if you don't have a paid POC, it can even be a small amount. But if there's an actual transaction, that gives you a lot more chances to actually increase versus we gave you something for free, now start paying for it. Those are 2 different worlds. Okay? You remind me of one note that I wanted to end this session with, because I have to, unfortunately, but we can take this offline. I've just given you some insights on how to get into enterprise. I want to be the devil's advocate for 1 minute. For many, many startups that I've seen, if you consider the cost, the energy, the focus, the resources for actually going to sell to an American, a European, whatever, foreign enterprise, if you consider the sales and the recruiting and the growth and the marketing and the business development and the trips and the POCs and the customer success and the account management and the sales process and the legal and the privacy and the changing to the code and all of that, and then you look at mature companies, 10, 50, 100 million in ARR in the middle of the way, you actually see that those clients are the least ROI positive. They have the lowest ROI out of all of their clients. So if your product can do SMB and SME and enterprise, and it's not just an enterprise product, I would say get your bread and butter with the SMB and SME. They're much easier to get into. They're much more flexible, etc. And only do it once you decide you want to move to the really big leagues. Because after you factor with clarity all of the costs, personal and financial, might not be that glamorous. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for the insights and the persona-based funnels and all of it. Thank you so much. Yeah.